The desert wasn't supposed to be silent. Not like this. Dr. Aris Thorne adjusted his goggles, the relentless sun beating down on his makeshift research station, little more than a tent and humming instruments bolted to cracked bedrock. His team was gone. 3 days ago, Jensen had pointed towards the western expanse, his voice a rasp. It moved Aris closer. Then he'd walked into the shimmering heat haze and hadn't returned. Vargas and Chen followed yesterday, drawn like moths, leaving only frantic, half-deleted sensor logs about spatial thinning and acoustic voids. Now Aris was alone, watching the instruments bleed nonsense. His radio spat static that somehow felt hungry. The thermometers near the western perimeter read a chilling 10°C. The sand 2 feet away, scorched at 50°C. Physics was unspooling. He forced himself to look west. For days it had been just the usual, punishing horizon, a blurry line where sky met sand. But now there was another horizon. It hung perhaps a mile away, superimposed over the real one like a smudge on glass. It wasn't a mirage. It was solid, yet utterly depthless. A line of pure, unreflective black. The horror horizon. Seeing it directly was like plunging his head into ice water. It didn't just absorb light. It absorbed meaning. The landscape before it didn't vanish, but it became irrelevant, flat, like a painted backdrop. The silence here was absolute, a physical pressure in his ears, swallowing even the sound of his own ragged breath. Aris knew with a cold certainty that bypassed thought that the horizon was closer than yesterday, much closer. It wasn't moving across the desert. The desert was dissolving into it. Reality itself was being consumed. His instruments screamed not with sound, but with frantic, impossible data on his screen. Gravimetric spikes, localized time dilation, the very atoms protesting. He should run east forever, but his legs were lead. The horizon exerted a terrible, silent pull, not gravity, but erasure, the promise of an end to the searing heat, the gnawing fear, the crushing weight of existence, an end to being. He saw Vargas, or what was left. A figure stood halfway between the tent and the horizon. It was Vargas's shape, vaguely, but composed of the same depthless black, flickering like a corrupted image. It didn't move. It simply was, an after-image burned onto the dying world, a warning, or a preview. Aris stumbled back, tripping over a cable. He landed hard, sand gritting against his cheek. When he looked up, the horror horizon filled his entire western view. It was no longer a line on the horizon. It was the horizon, stretching infinitely left and right, towering over him like a wall of oblivion. The silence was complete now, a vacuum sucking at his soul. The intense heat of the desert vanished, replaced by a cold that didn't register on the skin but seeped into the bone marrow, into the mind itself. He tried to scream. No sound came out. The air refused to carry it. He clawed at the sand, desperate to move, but his limbs felt distant, untethered. The world around the tent, the rocks, the distant dunes was flattening, losing texture, becoming mere suggestions of form painted onto the encroaching void. The horizon didn't advance. It simply was, and where it was, reality ceased. Aris watched as the edge of his tent, the vibrant orange nylon, touched the blackness. It didn't rip or tear. It unhappened. The color bled away into non-existence, the fabric dissolving into the void without a whisper, leaving only perfect, featureless black in its wake. The process was utterly silent, horrifyingly passive. The horizon wasn't attacking. It was the absence that consumed. It reached his outstretched hand. He felt nothing. No cold, no pain, no pull. He simply watched his fingers blur, lose definition, and then vanish into the seamless dark. There was no boundary, no line where he ended and the void began. He was becoming part of the silence, part of the horizon. The last thing Dr. Aris Thorne perceived wasn't darkness, but the terrifying clarity of the unaffected desert sky behind the horizon wall, a cruel, mocking sliver of blue. Then even that perception faded, smoothed into the infinite, silent black. The instruments in the tent flickered one last time, displaying a single impossible reading: local reality signature, null. Then the screen, the tent, the sand beneath it, dissolved into the advancing line of nothingness. The horror horizon hung, absolute and eternal, under the uncaring sun. It had consumed another pocket of existence, and somewhere in the crushing silence within the void, a thought that was no longer a thought echoed, not in sound, but in pure, desolate awareness. It comes.